Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Mueller. 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 No affirmative answers from the special counsel. Good morning, everyone. This is Gregory Junkbond Carpenter here on Waking Up Cerberus in the hinterlands of Utah. We have the lovely and wildly awesome Suzanne Sherman, and behind the controls, producing what he does best, productions, Mr. Jeff Johnson. You've just heard from Mozart, Ein klein Nachtmusik, K525, the Allegro, the first movement. Yes, Jeff, we're there. And we're going to kick it off today with a little notice that we received from our buddies in Facebook land. But first, Suzanne, disclaimer land and information, go.
Well, good morning, Junk Bond. Good morning, Mr. Producer, Jeff Johnson. Welcome, everybody, to the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny. We have got a 2-hour show ahead of you today. Really looking forward to some great topics. We're going to have Junk Bond contribute to his knowledge, much more vast than mine, of this whole Mueller debacle. We're going to get into a little bit of how this is going to affect the 2020 presidency. Is this good or bad for Trump? And if it is good, what are the Marxists going to do to overcome it? We know what they did or tried to do to steal the 2016 election. I think it's going to get a lot worse, and they're going to absolutely be out of their minds if they lose the next one. But we'll get to that in the next hour. Just want to remind you, you can follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Cerberus Radio Network, our fan page, CRN, YouTube page, same name, Cerberus Radio Network. We are up and live. We have a live chat going. Want to thank those of you that participate in that. I don't monitor it when we're on the air, but Jeff does, and he'll raise any comments that you have and you want to, if you want your opinions heard. You can also reach out to me on my Facebook page as well. I have, I think, 6 more days of hard time left to serve in the Zuckerberg Correctional Facility, but I can certainly see your messages and I can respond to them on the air. SoundCloud, please. You can find all of our shows there. If you can't hear live, you can download for free. Please follow on that one. Also subscribe to our YouTube page. Share with your friends. I want to thank those of you that are being so wonderful about sharing. As we know, we talk about this all the time. We are not liked by these tech giants. The Facebook zombies do not want us spreading the truth. They want the disinformation going out. And so you people that are sharing and doing all that is outstanding. 10th Amendment Center published my latest article that came out yesterday, and I put it up on my Twitter feed. It's on the CRN Twitter feed. I believe it's also on the CRN page as well. And that was with regards to a topic we shared last week, where the Black Robe Messiahs have said that across this continental landmass, you can give that finger to the cops and there's nothing they can do about it. So if you want to read why, and somebody said that the libertarian collectivists are wailing and shrieking as a result of my article. One thing I've noticed with the libertarians is they seem to be okay with national solutions if they promote freedom. A guy named Joe Buckman is the head of the Libertarian Party out here, and he actually blocked me and a bunch of other libertarians, and I don't even consider myself a libertarian, really, about the national reciprocity. And I said, well, you're running for United States Senate. What do you think this is a good idea? I believe he was running for Senate, either Senate or a congressional, local congressional district out here. But I said, what do you think about this? And his response was, I'm all for the feds forcing law on the states if it promotes liberty. So I got into that a little bit and why this is, again, something that seems like it's a victory for freedom and First Amendment rights. And again, that was published by the 10th Amendment Center yesterday. Yesterday also, Jeff Johnson and I did a little bit of work over the weekend, and we recorded an article that was also published by the 10th Amendment Center. And that was my article, Muskets to AR-15, Weapons of War or Enemies of Tyranny. And that's a recorded version. As you know, some people have asked if we could get an audio version of some of these articles. So thank you very much, Jeff, for doing that yesterday. And I have Doom website out also, SuzanneCSherman.com. All the articles, you can get all of our SoundCloud. You can click to SoundCloud, YouTube, and get right over there. That being said, how are you this morning, Jeff?
I'm doing pretty well. I am just on the cusp of having 3 days off. I took an extra day off this week, so I'm off Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, so I'm quite excited not to have to go to work for the next few days. Other than that, the weather is trying to get warmer here. I don't know if we're ever going to end this stupid winter, but you're feeling the same thing there. So,
yeah, we are here in Virginia. It's almost 70 degrees again. I tell you, this winter is killing me, Jeff.
Yeah, it was about 22 on the porch this morning. So I'm
Kelvin. Is that Kelvin?
I wish.
It's been cold as heck up there.
Yeah, I wish it was Kelvin because it'd be warmer than 22 Fahrenheit.
No, you're getting Celsius mixed up with Kelvin. See, on the absolute scale, that's hydrogen frozen at that temperature. You want Celsius, baby.
Okay, Celsius. I don't care. I just want warmer. Tired of it.
Frontal European Union. Go for it.
Oh well.
So anyway. Everybody's talking about the Mueller investigation.
We're going to start off with something else, Suzanne. We're going to start off with
there's a demerit for me. Okay. Yeah. I got a little. See, now, did you see this notice as well, you guys, on our Cerberus Radio Network page? You know, you get these overviews, and as you open your page, you get a little notices from Facebook. And maybe because I am considered, one of their hardened recidivist criminals here, they ask you, they have an ad center pull down, and it says, please review our non-discrimination policy. Our non-discrimination policy hasn't changed, but we're reminding advertisers that running ads or boosting posts that discriminate against people or groups is prohibited. Soon all advertisers will be required to review and accept the terms of our our non-discrimination policy to help maintain the integrity of our platform. Please review and accept as soon as possible. Facebook, you have no integrity. You are a bunch of racist, discriminatory liars.
How could you say that, Suzanne?
That's hateful.
That's why you're in jail.
That's why I'm in jail. And you know what? There's probably some little dweeb in a cubicle that's going to wait till there's one. They actually count down the minutes before you can go on. It says you can post in 6 days, 5 hours, blah, blah. They literally count down to the minute. This little dweeb's probably going to slap a 30-day one as soon as I get down to 5 seconds.
He's sitting there in his little room saying, yes, Rick, hold the button. Don't push it yet. It's almost time for Suzanne to go live. I have another incriminating piece of evidence that she wrote 15 years ago.
When she was telling the truth. And then, don't worry, little coyote, I will avenge your death. I think they probably saw me in my profile picture. I'm holding that coyote I shot in one of those anti-hunters, probably.
Viva la, the spirit of the coyote. Viva la spirit of coyote.
It lives on.
So anyway, Max, these guys, I'm going to get us back on course here. It's just,
what do you mean by that, Jeff?
You wanted a happy morning show. You got one. Now be quiet.
Tangents. You guys are the terrible ones here, but they're going off on tangents. I am so much the stick to the point.
I love citrus fruit. What are you talking about?
Yeah, that's definitely not me. I'm the one that goes off on tangents.
Welcome back, Jeff.
Yes.
And now with the news from Facebook is Jeff Johnson.
These guys, so what is discrimination? That's the problem. And when you point out what the Marxists are doing, aren't you discriminating against Marxists? I mean, really think about it. If you say something that the Marxists are doing, that is discrimination. You're pointing out the errors of their way. So you're discriminating against Marxists, and it says groups. So here we are. What is discrimination?
Well, we'll have to get into also this whole debacle with the Southern Poverty Law Center too. As we know, Facebook was actually using Southern Poverty Law Center to determine whether or not content is hateful. Well, they put that label on anybody with whom they disagree. So this is what's so silly about this. And again, people like to say, well, it's a free service. If you don't like it, create your own. Don't call for government intervention. I'm not saying I'm calling for government intervention. Although if there is, at this point, we're so lost and we'll never get back on course. I'll probably snicker from the sidelines here.
I think Facebook is being used actually as a tool to help people curtail their speech in expected, in a normalized manner. You're learning how not to speak out, how not to speak your mind, because you will be reprimanded for it, and you'll be, well, I don't want to say you'll be discriminated against, because you're the violator, you're the bad person here, right? So it's changing the mindset of people in order to combat free speech, and that's how you build an Orwellian society.
And Greg, last night I said to Suzanne, I am convinced that Facebook has created a generation of characters from Idiocracy. Because look at our page. For example, you shared like 3 posts, Greg. One was a Schultz cartoon.
Charles Schultz, right.
Then there was a post that was blue that talked about the crimes that they do and that they won't prosecute each other because they reveal their crimes. And then the last one was safe from Mueller. Mm-hmm. Okay, all those reached almost 2,000 people. People. I will post our shows. 50. It'll reach 50.
They're suppressing what's relevant. I mean, I could post a link.
I like that. I'm just share the crap out of that. Our shows, no one will share them.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you there. Where there was a bit of a delay, but I think
he's used to Facebook doing it to him. Don't worry.
Yeah.
What they're doing is suppressing what's relevant. And I can post a link for a 10th Amendment Center or an article that I've written or a show announcement. And again, hardly anybody will see it. But I can put a picture up of a chicken and the thread will go on for days. And this isn't a matter of our followers not acknowledging what we're doing. It's really a matter of Facebook hiding it. I think the way they have to get around that again is to click see first or something like that. But I think that, again, they're out to suppress these messages. And going back to the point I was making about, well, it's a free service and this is, you have to put up with it. Is it free? What they teach us in law school when we go in and take contracts in our first year of law school is, it takes certain elements to make a contract. And one of the elements is quid pro quo. You have to give something up to get something. Each party has to do so. And there has to be certain and definite terms. Well, there are terms of service with Facebook. We know we are giving something up. What I said last week, we've sold our very souls. Mm-hmm. That is consideration. Consideration is quid pro quo. What do you give to get what you're getting? Consideration. The consideration we give to get this opportunity to be on this platform. Let's see. We tell who our families are. We tell what kind of guns we have. We tell what we look like. We tell people if we've had surgeries or what kind of tattoos we have. We tell them our eating habits. We tell them our spending habits, our vacation habits, our bathroom habits, our workout habits. I think we all complete our own FBI, CIA dossier. All of us. That is exactly what your Facebook platform is, your profile is. Had I known this going in, wouldn't it be nice if we'd known this going in? And I had a friend that I was trying to go on there. It took a couple of years for a friend of mine to get me on there. And he said, no, I don't know what Zuckerberg's intentions are, and I don't trust his policies. He was right. He was right. We walked right into the trap. The thing is, we've used it to our advantage, and I think that's what maybe they didn't account for is their opposition. People like us are using this very effectively to the point we can. Logic, facts, history, rational behavior is all on our side. So what do they have to do to quash that is use technology to their advantage to our detriment. Go ahead, Junk Bond.
Yeah, I was going to say, last week we mentioned and talked a little bit about the DARPA program, Life Log, and how it mysteriously did everything that Facebook does, and maybe a little bit less, I would say, but it was enough to make, quote, social libertarians uneasy, and therefore the government shut it down in the end of January 2004. You don't shut down a program in the middle of the fiscal year for the federal government. That's unheard of. Nobody ever does that. You always use all the money that you've been allocated. Well, in January 2004, it shut down. And in February 2004, Facebook stood up. Go figure. Now, I'm not the smartest tool in the shed. And, when Foghorn Leghorn says, that boy there's about as dumb as a bag of wet rocks, I tell you, that's me he's talking about. But I'm smart enough to know that the government does not kill a program in the middle of the fiscal year. Theirs ends September 30th. It starts October 1st. So the end of January is at the end of 4 months or 1/3 of the year. Nothing gets shut down midway through a program like that. That just never happens. They always wait till the end of the fiscal year. They kill the program then. So you tell me, and I'm not being conspiracy crazy. I'm not insecure about myself and about what I do. I am speaking from a perspective of experience with programs, numerous government programs. And it is a very good opinion of mine that I would say that Facebook is the continuation of the DARPA program, Life Log, that was shut down. It just makes complete sense. Never attribute to malice what you can afford to link in with just human stupidity. They didn't cover up enough of it. They didn't make it obscure enough. So they didn't maliciously put it in your face. It just kind of like, oops, we let that one go. But you know what? There's so much information out there now. People won't even notice that that's what happened, that those things are linked together. They didn't do it on purpose to make you feel bad or anything like that, saying, ha, look at this. We've got this DARPA program and we've turned it into the thing that everybody in the world is going to be using. That's right. 1/4 of the world now has a Facebook account. Think about that. What? Is that really, realistically, is that not the greatest intelligence collection tool in the history of the world? Is that not amazing? And you have to account for all the people that don't have a computer. Okay. And we can do that in a pretty smart and adult way without saying, well, people in this community don't know how to use a computer, and people in that community over there, well, they can't get identification, so they can't purchase a computer because of export laws. And no, you don't even have to play that game. You could just go look at this neighborhood in Africa, this neighborhood in Alaska, this neighborhood in New York. People don't have, and it's not everybody everywhere. Don't forget that. People are going to use this platform. They're going to use something like this because it's the nature of people to be social. We're like dogs. We run in packs. We get in groups that we don't like to separate from. And even introverts open up and become more extroverted when they're in small groups of people that they're comfortable with. Yes, sir.
So we got a president tweeting. We got a vice president tweeting. We got the third in line, Pelosi, tweeting. We have our entire senior leadership of our government on Twitter tweeting constantly. And you don't think that would you say that foreign governments are watching these tweets and figuring out what the heck's going on in the U.S. government?
I think they're laughing.
I
Well,
would
I think
say
too. But I mean, this is a treasure trove of information for our so-called
well,
enemies.
so I would say that um, most of these tweets are associated with organized messaging. Others are because you want to get your right, you want to get your message out. You have to put out a certain amount of propaganda in order to support your message. So a lot of that stuff is going to be maybe not pre-planned, but planned as you go in order to have a desired effect on a specific population. Boy, have I said that a million times. So you have the off-the-cuff things that happen, and those are the things that you really have to watch for. Everything else has messaging content to it. We're going to tell, like for the president, right? We want this message to go out so that people that are Democrats, doubt whether Pelosi is a good leader. Well, those types of messages go to people, to political parties, to different subcultures in the United States, different cultures around the world. They have different things set up that just sends our message. Why? Because we're so imperialistic and we have a presence everywhere. I was reading the where's here? I just happen to have a copy lying around on my hair computer. This is the where is it? Oh, this is the U.S. Strategic Command commanders posture statement for the Senate Committee on Armed Services. I just happened to read this whole thing. And he talked about how China is now challenging our military superiority in Asia. Well, what the hell are we doing in Asia? I mean, what? Why? What vital national security interests do we have in Asia? Don't we have national security interests here at home that we should be taking care of? Why do we have troops deployed in 125 countries around the world? Yeah, that's right, 125. And all of his complaints about Russia, and they have these non-nuclear long-range missiles that can't be reviewed as part of the START treaty. And well, no, they're not nuclear, right? And then we have, I mean, a list of complaints that he has talking about China's lack of transparency on nuclear policies, force disposition, and weapons. Well, it says it challenged the existing free and open international order. What? And then it says,
is that a
further these actions seek to erode the U.S. standing in Asia. That's a direct quote. Now, well, again, what? Why? We're upset at China for doing the exact same thing that we did. Absolutely no sense. I'm sorry. I've ranted long enough. I'm done.
And who are we to say that another sovereign nation does not have its own sphere of influence? We have the Monroe Doctrine and the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. Not only that, now, hey, have you seen? I want to go really quick, backing up to the privacy issue.
Yeah, sorry.
Imagine, no, because I want to get through this as well. Imagine if they had just come out, if we'd gotten a form from the government saying, we want to know all the things that I just listed when I was last speaking. We want to know all this about you. We would tell them to pound sand. Yet we voluntarily put it on Facebook. Now, I just realized what I've been doing. Everybody shows what they're doing on Facebook. We try to have fun with it and be social and share what's unique and special about our lives. But I think about how much I revealed that I absolutely refuse to give them by refusing to answer the American Community Survey. Well, how do you heat your home? Do you have a wood stove? I'm not telling you that. Go pound sand. What do I have on Facebook? A nice little video of my wood stove with a beautiful fire in it. All the stuff they ask on there, they can find on Facebook.
Have you say they tricked you?
I think so.
So, but there was no malicious intent. Really, seriously.
They want to help our community. They want to see what our community, what services our community needs. And that's what the lady said. We're trying to make your community better. I said, if you want to make my community better, mind your own
back off
business. Go away.
Back off, witch. Leave my community alone.
Greg, I thought you were getting another demerit there. For a second there, I thought you said something else that ended up in CK. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I was just cringing for a second.
No, we've changed our
Jeffrey,
rules.
please.
At least while we're on the air.
I'm more Facebook compliant now. I've taken my medication.
Junk Bond, what's the latest on the Mueller investigation?
Mueller.
Mueller.
And Mueller strikes out.
After Mueller is having a kidney replaced.
He's been drinking so much.
Well, we're a little bit surprised that they're
Why is
reopening
this
the
going
Russian
on?
investigation.
I'm sorry.
And also specifically,
Shut up. Okay, sorry.
My goodness. Now you see now, Jeff. Now that's the man. Sign her up. We want her on our team.
We've already got 3 people speaking out of turn. I don't need another one on here.
Mueller. Yeah, so it's funny here because I remember back when I was young man. I had made I had written an excellent essay that was up on the New Sons of Liberty website back in the day, back when they were up and running. And it was the fallacy of the Grizzly Step report. You guys remember this one at all? Grizzly Step?
Mm-mm. And that was a good site, by the way. That's a shame that went away. But fear not, we are going to have our own website. What's the name going to be for the network?
It's going to be Cerberus.radio here as soon as we get it up and we flip the switch.
Awesome.
We've been working on it. It's probably going to take one more week, folks. Bear with me. I've got to travel again as of tomorrow morning. I'll be up at 3 a.m. tomorrow morning to get the heck out of town. And I shall return Friday night somewhere around close to midnight. So,
are you taking your waiters with you?
I am taking my waiters with me. Matter of fact, all the servers at the restaurant are coming with me. No, my hip waiters. Yes.
Your hip waiters.
Oh, indeed. Yeah, we're going to the sunny, shiny city on the hill of Omaha. That liberal bastion of insanity. It's funny. It's like there's 2 places in Nebraska that are psychotically liberal. It's Omaha and Lincoln. And then the rest of it is about as conservative can be.
Isn't that, though, the dirge of every state? You get the capital, you get a university, you get the seat of government, and the population there ruins it for the rest of the state. We have that in Utah with Salt Lake City, and you see that in New York. You see that with the left coast, California, and Seattle and Portland, just destroying the rest of the state. Again, we'll get into why we need a solution, because otherwise, especially now, if you consider, we'll get into this later on, the Electoral College and how they're going to use that to our own detriment. But anyway, Mueller,
right. So this report came out in December 29th, 2016. It's called Grizzly Step, STEPPE Russian malicious cyber activity. You can get it from the Department of Helpless Security's website. And the first thing that they had at the top, and this was the immediate key, that this whole thing was a farce. I mean, this was great. It says Joint Analysis Report. This is supposed to be from DHS and the FBI. It says, disclaimer, this report is provided, quote, as is, for informational purposes only. Since when have you had a report that was just for informational purposes that was sent out to the entire world? Never happens. Especially if it has computer tips on how to set up your computer and do different things to avoid getting hacked. And it's all like, I'd say 2nd or 3rd grade level stuff that everybody does anyway. So there was no news in this. Second sentence, the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, for those of you who haven't been abused by that enough yet, does not provide any warranties or any kind regarding any information contained within. And then it has a disclaimer: DHS does not endorse any commercial products or service referenced in the advisory or otherwise. This document is distributed. Blah, 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 blah.
Good to know.
But in those first 2 sentences, everything you wanted to know about the report is told to you. The report is provided, quote, as is for informational purposes only. That means there's absolutely no value to it whatsoever. And DHS does not provide any warranties of any kind regarding any information contained within, thereby making it an FBI piece of propaganda, not DHS, because DHS wouldn't sign off and validate anything that was said in here, even though they put their name on there and said that they did it with the FBI. And what was this about? This was about the Russian hacking into the U.S. elections, the federal elections, or the national elections of 2016, on how they identified the different ATPs, ATP 28, ATP 29. ATP is an advanced persistent threat. So an ATP, unlike a piece of other type of computer virus or malware, something like that, an advanced persistent threat is something that is highly developed, usually by a nation state, because it costs a lot of money to make these things. And they're so technical that you just can't do it on your own. You need a lot of big brains put together to make these things run. So they claimed that it's been observed that ATP 29 and ATP 28 have been known to affect systems like the ones that the U.S. government used for elections. And it delivered what was called a RAT, which is a remote access tool. So if you ever sit at your computer and you have a problem with it, right, and you call the IT guy downstairs and say, dude, man, my computer's really and he says, okay, hold on a second. You're going to see something pop up on your screen. Click it. And you click that, and all of a sudden your mouse starts moving around and things happen on your computer and you're not touching it, right? So this is the computer IT guy in your service center who is using what's called a RAT, a remote access tool. He can access your system from wherever his help desk is to fix your problem. Well, this is what was claimed was used for these election machines. Now, keep in mind that the election machines have no internet access whatsoever. There's one key thing that's required for a RAT to work. Suzanne, do you want to take a gander at what that one thing might be if you're going to remotely come into somebody else's computer?
I'm thinking connection to
connection, right?
I mean,
you got to be connected to something else. That's boom, there it is. Well, it's like John Gotti fixing everything in Palestine and Israel, right? Hey, you guys come over here, you guys go over there. We'll talk a little bit here. We'll have a little schmooze, and you know what? You give up the West Bank, and we'll give you guys Jersey. What do you say? Something like that. You got to have talk back and forth. There's no communication with these systems. You put an SD card on the side that downloads everything, and that's it. There's no internet connected. You cannot deliver a RAT to these systems. It doesn't work. So by the time I got through the first paragraph in this high-speed report here, a Grizzly Step report back in December, I said, you know what? This is just too funny. I was just sitting at my desk cracking up. And, baby Sasquatch comes over. He says, Dad, you okay? You need your medication? I said, no, I'm okay. I'm good. Thanks. But something struck me as funny. He said, what's that? So I showed him the report, and he couldn't even get through the disclaimer. Up in the top, the report is provided as is for informational purposes only. He goes, Dad, they never do that. I'm like, I know. He goes, propaganda. Like, baby Sasquatch, you earn a star. Here, I'll put a lamb out back and tie it to a post to you. Go eat. It was completely useless. It was a waste of breath to have this friggin' report written. But it contained all the essential elements that would allow someone to go and target for investigations. That's what it did do. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, and remember, lovely friend Karl Rove said it doesn't matter if something's true or not. Once you get that impression out there, you cannot undo it. So if something is put forth that is obviously false and the people buy into it, you cannot overcome the impression that you made. Let me ask you a question though about these electronic voting machines. You know, we hear about George Soros owning, we talked about that in Venezuela, a stake in these companies. They might not be connected to the internet, but isn't it possible that they can be programmed? We hear all these people talking about anomalies where they try to vote for, say, a Republican candidate and their vote is automatically switched to Democrat. My son voted here in Summit County. I filled in my ballot and turned it in rather than mailed it. I brought it in personally, but he used the machine. Right. Interestingly enough, right after the voting ended, they extended it because of an anomaly in the machines, and two gentlemen showed up at my house. We had a gerrymandering proposition, which of course was going to benefit the Democrat Party out here.
What?
And
really?
My son voted against it. And they came to the door saying his vote wasn't counted. There was an anomaly. We're out chasing votes. We're trying to get people to vote for this proposition. So somehow the vote wasn't counted, but they came here to pressure us. I mean, when you're out in the middle of nowhere and two dudes show up at your house and are trying to tell you how to vote, some people might consider that intimidating. I did not. I was insulted and told them to leave. But that being said, his vote wasn't counted. He was too far away by the time they came and did this to come back here and vote. He had gone out of the county.
Can I interrupt here before we get the answer from Greg? I just want to go into our chat room. Justin, our friend Justin, you know who Justin is.
Hi, Justin. Yes, Justin, our good friend and host of the podcast, The Other Side. That Justin?
That Justin.
Hi, Justin.
Government clears government of government wrongdoing. Not saying there was collusion. The whole thing was a farce and a distraction. And to that, I answered, you are absolutely correct. This was all political theater. It was red meat for the masses. Anyway, Greg, go ahead and answer her question. I just had to get our chat room involved.
That was beautiful, man. That was beautiful. Yes, it is. It's all political kabuki theater. It's all it is. Because you got to keep the people engaged, right? You got to keep them busy, not thinking about or being productive in any realistic type of a way until the next election, right? Our election cycles our 4-year election cycles are only they're 3.5 years now, 3.5 years long.
Oh, well, we're already into the presidential election series now. I mean, it's already started, and this is red meat. I mean, if you can't even watch the news without seeing the piranhas boiling the water, getting the red meat that's being tossed to them. It's just
that's hateful to all the. It's hateful to all the vegans and vegetarians out there, Jeff. I want you to know that. We're going to have that ban from Facebook.
I was just discriminating. Facebook's new policy. I'm just going to get banned, even though I'm on Facebook.
Why do we even keep you around?
So back to her question. Go ahead.
Back to the real question at hand.
Here, it's time to get back to the real show. Get rid of Johnson. He's messing things up.
So, what was the question? No, I'm just kidding. So you can remotely program things like that. It does happen. It can happen. Again, I would go back to never attribute to malice to what can be done by what can be the cause of human error. And I would say to you that it was probably in most cases, not every case, but in many cases, it's just a misconfiguration of the touch screen that causes these things to happen. Because for a couple of reasons. One is they're not used but once a year, seriously, and the maintenance on them is not done in a regular manner. So you have a very erratic maintenance schedule. If they looked at them more closely and they treated it in a more serious manner than they do with taking care of these things, I think that you'd have less problems with it. But again, I wouldn't attribute too much to the fact that somebody's screwing with it, as opposed to it's just, it's just somebody else's problem, and I'm not going to be the guy to deal with it or whatever.
But going back to this whole collusion thing, we have this such a double standard as we see all the time. I mean, look at, for instance, with regards to political correctness, what happened with Roseanne Barr, as opposed to, I don't know, Hillary Clinton, who in an interview said that all blacks looked alike. There was absolutely, there were crickets. There was no recoil from that whatsoever for her. So we've got this, and it's going to be interesting because we also haven't heard anybody mention really that, I think it was in 1965, Ted Kennedy actually approached the Russians to help get Walter Mondale elected.
Yes, he did.
That seems to be that. So it's okay then. Is that correct?
I believe it was okay because it was Teddy Kennedy.
Okay. And he literally could do no wrong. This whole Me Too movement, you can apparently, well, that's all water under the bridge.
They were just afraid that they'd end up in a river somewhere.
Yeah.
He was hoping they'd end up in a river somewhere.
I found a good article today. I
didn't want to jump because they might end up in a river. He might just drive off and leave him in the car.
Quick article, really quick here. FEE, the Foundation for Economic Education. This was something that I'd come across, and I know this will resonate with Junk Bond because he knows all of these cases here. But if you think that if you're still crazy enough to trust the FBI and the CIA, here's an example here. This article says 8 historic cases that show the FBI and CIA were out of control long before Russiagate, and Junk Bond can name these faster than I can as I scroll through this list, but we'll post this on the page and you go through, but I'll go through the headlines here. The first one, the time CIA considered bombing Miami and blaming it on Castro.
Castro, yeah. Operation Northwoods.
Okay.
Yep.
And now, once upon a time, was that not conspiracy theory? The very same conspiracy theory that YouTube plans to banish from their platform. Number 2, in 2014, the CIA was caught red-handed spying on the Senate Intelligence Committee.
Yep, we sure did.
The FBI's suicide letter to MLK and his wife.
They tried to scare them into not being such extremists, which would disrupt and upset the functions of the U.S. government.
Number 4, the CIA forced prisoners to participate in mind control experiments in the 1950s. We've talked about that. Junk Bond, you've covered the MK Ultra experiments
extensively, my lady. But that also extended down into France and into Latin America. They took prisoners from a they were doing hard time. There was 800 of them, and they were signed over by the government, and they were infected with incurable diseases, so that we could check out the effects.
Number 5, the FBI systemic forensic fraud in crime labs.
I'm not going to name any specific ones, but yeah.
Operation Midnight Climax, drugging unsuspected.
Midnight Climax was, yep, and that's where they took a bunch of folks out in San Francisco, and they drugged them, and they had no idea that they were getting LSD, and they took the information that they collected from these folks. Well, basically, they captured everything on camera, and they had all of these businessmen who went into a brothel. They gave them LSD. Then they collected information on them, and then they used it to blackmail them. But they were, quote, studying their behaviors, but they were blackmailing them. And the good thing about Midnight Climax is that it actually went a step further, and it taught the people at the CIA something very important, that you can do this to your leadership to make sure that you get more funding. And they did that. They ended up blackmailing their leadership into giving them more funding for the programs.
I'm not saying a prostitute was involved, but if you think that there wasn't something like this in Robert's decision with the mandate, the individual mandate, and the ACA, I think we got some to do.
I got some property to give you that Hillary sold to the Russians.
Yes. Number 7, the FBI has routinely staged acts of terrorism.
I can't comment on that on air.
The people can read about this again in fee. We'll post it on the CRN website or page on Facebook. The CIA's here's one: media manipulation campaigns. Now let's see how many times in the ledger in the guest recorder at the White House did Mark Zuckerberg visit then President Barack Obama. I remember somebody was being critical that Zuckerberg was there more often than I believe General Petraeus was at the time when we were involved in Iraq. So what was that about, I wonder?
Oh, he wasn't there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay.
That goes back to the Life Log program that I was explaining that probably really didn't exist.
So here's what we have now. We've got an article that says it's official. Russiagate is this generation's weapons of mass destruction. What do you think about that?
Oh my God. Are they meaning that it is the thing that's going to destroy us in the future? Is that what they're saying?
I'm not thinking that's what they mean.
Russiagate's a joke. It's not even, the whole thing isn't even worthy of repeating. That's how anemic the whole concept of all this crap is. I don't.
So we spent 2 years chasing unicorns when there were actual crimes that were committed that have gone ignored because, as we know, the organizations referred to as the deep state had Hillary Clinton's back. You know, we see these politicians now demanding that the full report be released. How about, I have to give Andrew Wilkow credit for this one. He wanted the transcripts from the meeting with Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch on the tarmac. You know, when the FBI interviewed Hillary Clinton, she wasn't even put under oath, and she wasn't even the whole interview wasn't even recorded. So they had her back the whole time. And this was a result of, look at all the cheating, look at all the lying, the media. Donna Brazil, who fixed the debate, has now been hired by Fox News Network. Folks, if you need yet another reason to stop listening to that garbage station, there's another one. And the funny thing is, all these people are complaining, take her off the air, take her off the air. You know, why are you surprised?
I'm not surprised.
I'm not surprised. So
Very good.
Anyway, yeah,
it's insane, right? It's insane, and we go back for, and this is the problem: is we go back for more, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's literally there's no end to the insanity of what's happening. We just keep going with this news cycle, like it's crack. Like we gotta have it. We gotta have it. And guess what, folks? You do have to have it. Creates a certain amount of endorphins in your brain. Makes you excited, makes you feel good because something's happening and you can experience it, but you don't actually have to be directly part of it.
Well, and then you can get on these AM radio shows or FM too, but the mainstream media, these terrestrial stations, and then you can call in and whine and complain about the Democrats and feel like you've taken part in the fight. And in fact, nobody's really talking about what's really relevant. I think one of the big reasons we're having this issue too is I thought the choice of Jeff Sessions was an absolute debacle. Not only did we lose a coveted Senate seat that people seem to think is very important to have, but Sessions immediately recused himself, allowing for this whole thing to happen. I would think, and maybe you will disagree with me, but it seems to me we knew how Eric Holder was pretty much a guardian for Donald Trump. He even had a contempt of Congress citation. Nothing happened. I'm sorry, he was covering for Obama. And nothing happened. Doesn't a sitting president have a right to have a DOJ that's going to have his back? It seems like it's always okay when the Democrats do it. But here we have now people that are linked to Hillary Clinton, her campaign, and now they are investigating a sitting president when they obviously have a bias. You know, when I went to law school, we had to take an ethics course saying that we as practicing attorneys had to avoid even the appearance of an impropriety. This whole investigation, the cast of characters, the lineup stinks to high heaven. Nobody has been indicted for anything remotely to do with collusion, which, by the way, is not a crime.
Right.
There's
That's the
no
funny
crime.
part. That's the funny part when they talk about all this. That when the report comes out and there's no finding of quote collusion,
Which isn't a crime.
and so what's the second part of the report? Well, the second part is the special counsel decided to investigate the obstruction of justice aspect. Why? Well, because he felt like he was getting stonewalled. From who? There's no one to get stonewalled from. There's no crime that's been committed. I find it very, very dishonest, I would say. Very intellectually dishonest. I mean, you can go all the way back to the beginning, and you can see that there was nothing. It was like reading a Tom Clancy novel, for God's sake. Right? You have all this spooky stuff going on. And it was back in January 2017. Once that report came out on the 29th of December, January, I want to say 14th, 13th, somewhere in there, the Senate Intelligence Committee announced in a joint statement that they were going to be investigating the Russian intelligence activities impacting the United States. Now, is that a big scope? Yeah, that's huge. Why is it a big scope? Well, ask anybody in the intelligence community or who's intellectually honest, let me put it like that, and say, why is Russia spending so much time with their intelligence activities checking us out? Well, maybe because we're doing the same thing. You know, if we backed off, maybe they would back off. I don't know, just thinking out loud. But there was three things that the committee wanted to follow. The intelligence behind the report of Russian activity, the intelligence community report of their activity on the 2016 election, the counterintelligence related to ties between Russia and individuals associated with, it was what? Just quote, political campaigns. So it wasn't actually the Republicans at first. See, they came out with this nice joint thing. It makes it sound all inclusive. And then the third thing was Russian active measures, including hacking that interfered with the 2016 elections. And what? Other U.S. interests. Now, how broad is that again? They pretty much gave this guy carte blanche to go and just look at everything and anything in the world he wanted.
They cheated. They lied. They used immigration. They used the federal judiciary as a weapon to strike down voter ID laws. They fixed debates.
And they smoked joints.
And
it was a joint thing.
And they still lost. So then they launched this investigation when really now what we're seeing, and there's an article from The Hill. I think we've got about 6 more minutes in this hour. I'm just going to go through this article
before we hit the break because we started a minute late today.
We have how much time?
At this point, we have about 7 minutes.
Really quickly, here's an article from The Hill. And it says here, and I was going to discuss this last week and we just got busy, but the case for Russian collusion really goes against the Democrats. And, here's what I'm thinking. You want to see Russian collusion? Uranium One, Hillary Clinton's State Department, for crying out loud. How obvious does it have to be? But as we indicated earlier, this deep state, these organizations have her back. It's very obvious. Here's this article from The Hill with Republicans on both House and Senate investigative committees having found no evidence. Donald Trump being guilty of Democrat-inspired allegations of Russian collusion, which again is not a crime. It is worth revisiting one anecdote that escaped significant attention during all this hysteria that continues to have U.S. security implications. Again, collusion has no U.S. security implications. In fact, the Democrats' immigration policies and the New York Times being taken over by I forget the guy's name, but he's a Mexican national, and all of a sudden going now to open border policies. I submit to you, Mexico is influencing our elections more than Russia. But going back to this article, Hillary Clinton worked with Russian leaders, including Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and then Dmitry Medvedev, to create U.S. technology partnerships with Moscow's version of Silicon Valley. Clinton's handprint was everywhere on this project that took place 2009 to 2010. The tip of a diplomatic spear to reboot. Remember also, Obama, after the election, I can be more flexible to Putin, or we're going to have a reset with Russia. They loved Russia. All of a sudden now Trump lost and they need a boogeyman to blame Hillary Clinton's loss. She was a god-awful candidate and human being for that matter. So anyway, they were talking about this was going to be the diplomatic spear to reboot U.S.-Russian relations after years of hostility. A donor to the Clinton Foundation, Russian oligarch Viktor Vekselberg, led the Russian side of the effort after several American donors to the Clinton charity, I call it the Clinton Crime Syndicate. Clinton's State Department facilitated U.S. companies working with the Russian project. She personally invited Medvedev to the Silicon Valley. The collaboration occurred at the exact same time. Maybe this is a coincidence. Bill Clinton made his trip to Russia and he picked up a $500,000 check for a single speech.
Turn cough, Mr. President. Turn and cough.
Yes, the former president's trip raised eyebrows inside the wife's State Department. Internal emails show this is what they called pay to play. Why do you think the donations dried up once she wasn't elected president? She asked permission to meet Vekselberg, the head of Skoklovo. Oh my God, these names. A senior official. Let's see. So this goes up to Uranium One, a Canadian company with massive uranium reserves. So what we're seeing here is that they received a ton of money for her through using her position in the State Department to facilitate this purchase. Is that an accurate summation of what happened?
Do you really think she used her position to, politically jockey around and make money too at the same time?
Only to help children and families.
There you go. Thank you very much. Okay. then yes, I believe it did happen, and it does sound accurate then.
Well, I always wonder how in the heck do these congressmen and senators go there of meager means, maybe middle class, upper middle class, maybe. And now you look at them, they're all multi-millionaires. I mean, how does that happen? I mean, obviously they can't be there for the money.
Well, don't you think it's pretty obvious? Look at the regulation in the markets, right? They all have insider information on how the markets are going to go because they set the regulations for the markets. They all understand what types of international deals are made, what businesses are being bought, what businesses are being sold, because they make the rules for that stuff. They see it all coming, and they're able to make investments in a wise manner that supports making a ton of money. That's all it is.
I think there was also a link with the uranium deposits and the area in Oregon where the Mueller Range incident took place and the execution of Lavoy Finicum. So
same place, yeah.
And this is, nobody remembers this stuff. All of these issues get so buried with one scandal after another. We keep forgetting about them. But in the next hour, we've got some really cool stuff to talk about. We've got I talked last week about a Utah gun enthusiast who had to surrender his bump stock. That went to the federal court. So we're going to be updating that. I've got an interesting article of what nations are going to crumble and what will survive. What will happen if we can't fix our problems via political situations. some other cool stuff too. Off-grid survival, outbreak of infectious diseases now in these liberal bastions. And we'll see what else we have coming up. I think we're about ready for a break. We've got
a minute and a half.
A minute and a half. Well, let's wrap this up, and then we'll go to the next hour and get on some of these other cool topics.
Yeah, Jeff, don't keep pushing her like that, because she's just going to keep running with it. You know that, don't you? You just can't say, you got a minute left, and then expect something to, that's not going to happen. It really isn't. I want to talk about infectious diseases. That's of course, that's my forte.
Yeah, so, I just wonder. So really quick on the political stuff.
Nothing sounds more fun than talking about infectious disease.
Dude, you
have no idea the fun that you can have with infectious diseases. I'm just saying.
I'm trying to talk.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think this will hurt or help Donald Trump in 2020? Do you think that there's going to be such a backlash that they might lose, that they're going to go full bore, get the states to surrender their electoral college votes for the popular vote and push this over the top? So there is absolutely no way that Trump or any other non-Democrat, non-Marxist leader can ever win again. Because now they're also talking about packing.
Hold on to that thought.
All right.
In the next hour.
Cerberus Radio Network, protecting liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny.
Paul, are these two men in the middle insufficiently conservative for you?
Well, I think that the problem is nobody's to define what being conservative means. And I think that is our problem. Conservatives means we have smaller government and more liberty. And yet, if you ask what have we done, I think we've lost our way completely. Our rhetoric is still pretty good. But when we get in charge, we expand the government. You talk about Dodd-Frank, but we gave Sarbanes-Oxley. We gave debts as well, when we're in charge. So if it means limited government, you have to ask a basic question: what should the role of government be? The founders asked that question, had a revolution, wrote a constitution. And they said the role of government ought to be to protect liberty. It's not to run a welfare state and not to be the policeman of the world. And so if you're going to conservative, how can you be conservative and cut food stamps, but you won't cut spending overseas? There's not a nickel or penny that anybody will cut on the conservative side overseas spending, and we don't have the money. They're willing to start more wars. So I say if you're conservative, you want small government across the board, especially in personal liberty. What's wrong with having the government out of our personal lives? So this is what we have to decide: what conservative means, what limited government means. And I have a simple suggestion. We have a pretty good guide, and if we follow the Constitution, government would be very small, and we would all be devoted conservatives.
Cerberus Radio Network, protecting liberty and freedom from the flames of tyranny.
Welcome back, everybody, to Hour 2 of Waking Up Cerberus. I'm Suzanne Sherman. Junk Bond, Greg Carpenter, and Jeff Johnson are live with me here in the studio. I think Junk Bond ran to go get some more coffee. So I'll start this next hour off. I want to remind you can follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Cerberus Radio Network. Please join our fan page, CRN. Thank you for those of you that are in the chat room and contributing. Jeff, I think we had somebody that wanted to get in and contribute. I hope he found his way in there. I did see that comment as well. SoundCloud, we have everything. In case you can't hear us live, you can download for free. Please follow, subscribe on our YouTube page so you can get notifications when we go live or upload any new files. We did record an episode of Fundamentals of Federalism where you can hear the audio version of my article, Muskets to AR-15, Weapons of War, or Instruments of Tyranny, whatever. I don't remember the whole name of it. But that is up. Jeff and I worked hard last night and got that one done. 10th Amendment Center just published my article also about the Supreme Court decision that it is okay. The Black Robe Messiahs have ruled it is okay for everybody across this continental landmass to flip the bird to the cops. So forget about federalism. You can flip the bird to the cops while the Supreme Court flips the bird to federalism. Junk Bond is back.
I'm back. Hello.
I have some news out of Utah.
Can I just do one disclaimer up front first, if we could?
Yes.
We put a posting up on the CRN Facebook page there. And we just made a little announcement. I want to read it to everyone. So if you have the chance, please go there and comply. It says here at CRN, we're making a list of everyone who receives our hard-earned money, like unemployment, welfare, food stamps. Don't be shy. Tell us who you are. We'd like to put a face on the other side of theft. So please, if you are receiving those types of benefits from the federal, state, local governments or whatever, just put your name up there on the Facebook page. Let us know who you are, because I'd really like to know who's stealing my money. Thank you.
Pretty much everybody.
Except you guys.
Right? Okay. Utah gun enthusiast has been granted a temporary stay from the bump stock ban. I covered this story last week, and a U.S. Court of Appeals. Now, this bump stock ban is a federal law. So the federal court is the appropriate forum to seek redress from this law.
Not in Missouri.
Right. The U.S. Court of Appeals has issued a temporary stay on a ban for one Utah gun activist who is attempting to block the new rule that outlaws this gun accessory known as the bump stock starting tomorrow. Clark Aposhian is chairman of the Utah Shooting Sports Council. And he argues in a lawsuit, and you're going to see where they get it wrong here, and they always do, that the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives violated the Constitution in prohibiting the device. This is obviously about bump stocks, but I think it speaks to something much bigger. He said, this is about government overreach. This is about administration overreach. You might be able to see where I'm going with this. During the temporary stay, he is the only person who will be able to legally own a bump stock. The court granted the temporary stay on Thursday for the purpose of giving the court adequate time to properly consider the motion. U.S. District Judge Jill Paris recently denied his request for a preliminary injunction, concluding he isn't likely to win the lawsuit he filed against the government on the merits. You know why? I'll tell you why, because he's right, but not for the reasons he's claiming. Aposhian appealed the ruling to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals in Denver, seeking an injunction against the appeal. The court's decision to stay the bump stock rule is an important recognition of the high stakes in this case. While the order is limited, the court recognizes that he has raised a substantial basis to question the rule's validity. The Trump administration in late December adopted a new federal rule that redefined the devices as machine guns, therefore banning them under existing law. The rule directs owners to destroy or surrender their bump stocks to the ATF before it takes effect. Now, let me remind you, this case was premised on the notion that it was unconstitutional for the ATF or President Trump to have this ban put into place. They never address the real fact that the ban is unconstitutional on its face because it is a federal infringement of firearms. They actually capitulate that. They capitulate there. They say, well, the implication is that Congress is the appropriate party to come up with this ban. No, they're not. No, they are not. So again, they are attacking this law. We give up every major point. We have to come to the point where we will no longer give that concession. Every single firearms law is unconstitutional, and oftentimes they will cite Heller. I blast Antonin Scalia, no pun intended with these words, for his ruling in Heller. His interpretation was completely incorrect by Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's exactly how you insulate your power, by taking and from one level or two levels of abstraction, allow the argument to be retained in that venue. Don't let it get back to the original cause of the problem. If you can hold it one level out, two levels out from the problem, saying, oh, it was illegal for the ATF to do this. Not that it's illegal for the federal government to do it. You say, if you keep that level of abstraction in place, your power will not be chiseled away at. You're able to insulate and continue to build the empire from there.
There was also an AR
information to this guy. I mean, because quite honestly, if you could get information to him and get him on board with the idea that, you know, the Constitution first never was delegated to this federal government the authority over firearms. Nowhere in Article 1, Section 8 is that power delegated. So even if there was no Second Amendment, they do not have the authority to do any federal firearms laws.
But they're not going to go after that, Jeff. They're not going to go that way because they know they'll lose.
Like, oh, I got a Second Amendment right. Second Amendment right. I'm sorry, Mark. Greg, go ahead.
Oh, all I was saying was that they're not going to go with that type of an argument in a federal court because it's already been conceded the fact that the firearms laws that were first put in place in 1934 are completely just.
They may be legal, but they're not constitutional. They're unconstitutional. And so if this guy,
that's my point, though. That's my point. Is they're going to lose on constitutional grounds because it's in their minds it's a legal law. That's the problem. That's where we
I know, but here's the thing, Greg. If they would go there and make the argument, they may lose. But what they do is they educate. And in the future, maybe we'll get good rulings in the future. But right now, as long as we keep arguing these cases the way that they want it, the government wants us to frame them, we're going to lose forever. But until we start framing the argument properly, that they, number one, don't have the delegated power, and number two, that the Bill of Rights were, per the preamble, an absolute restriction on the federal government. They were not allowed to touch on any of these subjects, guns being one of them, firearms being one of them. Until we start making those arguments, we are destined for failure forever.
We will.
Nobody's going to make that. Yeah, nobody's going to make that short-term concession and lose because they have too much. Well, they have their too much personal skin in the game, and they don't want to personally lose out. They don't want to be the person to personally lose for the
cause.
He's going to lose
anyway. He's going to lose anyway. So what difference does it make at this point? Go down with the truth, with what is real, not with the propaganda that the government wants, because they're going to lose either way. I mean, really, if you lose telling the truth or you lose telling the lie, what difference does it make at this point? I mean, I'll shut up for a while. Go ahead.
No, that's a good point, Jeff. That's a good point. I actually was under the impression they might actually win this thing against the ATF.
Well, and going back to the 1934 Firearms Act, we got that as a result of the violence that ensued from the Prohibition era. Now, right. Granted, the prohibition of alcohol came about the proper way by means of a constitutional amendment. Mm-hmm. They had another amendment to repeal the prohibition, but the violence that ensued, we can thank for that massacre, the Valentine's Day Massacre, mm-hmm. that was used to have the 1934 Firearms Act. Isn't it convenient? These tragic shootings always result in an exponential expansion of government, particularly vis-a-vis our firearms pre-existing, not constitutional or Second Amendment rights. This goes back all the way there. And then if you ask, well, where's the constitutional authority? Oh, the Firearms Act of 1934. This is the difference between what is lawful and what is constitutional. So when I go on some of these other terrestrial station talk shows, the typical narrative is, well, you know, the Immigration Act, the federal government, Congress granted themselves the power to regulate immigration. How convenient is that? Well, that means immigration regulations now are lawful. So I say, fine, we're going to argue that under this United State of America, these national immigration laws are constitutional, are lawful, but please do not cloak your argument in the Constitution and say that everything's going to be just fine if we get back to the Constitution, because we are not, especially when you cite these laws.
Mhm.
Amaland has an article out here. Federal court, tell me if you can spot the issue here. Federal court rules New York stun gun. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. New York state stun gun bans are unconstitutional. And once again, these are the articles. These are the pro-gun organizations that are trying to cheer on more power being grabbed by the federal judiciary. The federal judiciary, as I say all the time, thanks to the incorporation doctrine, has been the springboard from which this federal republic has been systematically dismantled. Here it says, New York's sweeping prohibition on the possession and use of tasers and stun guns by all citizens for all purpose, even for self-defense in one's own home, must be declared unconstitutional in light of Heller. Actually, what they need to do is say in light of McDonald, because McDonald incorporated the Second Amendment against the state. But in Heller, Scalia said that the Second Amendment protects handguns, leaving the door open for these bans we're seeing discussed now on assault rifles, on ammunition, the enhanced background checks, because apparently the only thing the Second Amendment is good for is handguns. And even those you cannot have with you anytime, any place, because he says in his opinion, just because it's a right, it's a constitutional right, it doesn't mean you can carry any gun anytime. What it means, Scalia, is it's none of your damn business. But 63 pages to make himself sound like a genius. So this is an opinion that was issued in the case of a guy in, let's see, it was called Matthew Avitabali versus Colonel George Beach. And this is a federal law saying that that the state of New York cannot have a ban on these self-defense items. I don't think they should have a ban on that. But again, it's not for the federal judiciary to decide, because it was prohibited to the general government. It was never delegated in Article 1, Section 8. It was expounded upon in the Second Amendment. It's a 10th Amendment issue. If the people of the state of New York are serious about reversing this, try, good luck, like I tried in California, to get politicians that will recognize your rights to be safe and secure by being able to defend yourself. So otherwise move. And this is a typical scenario of we have a big city ruining it for the rest of the people in the state. When I go to New York and I'm driving around upstate New York, on pretty much everybody's lawn, you can see signs protesting the SAFE Act. And this is an imposition on these people out in country areas where you really do need a firearm by the people in the city of New York. So I just wanted to bring that up. Go ahead.
Here's the wonderful thing about federalism. Some states will suck. And you know what? California, New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, they suck. You know what people are doing from New York? They're leaving. New York is dying. And you know what? Good for New York. I'm glad the people that are there are smart enough to get out. Go where the laws are good. I know somebody in this discussion right now that did that very thing. So
wait. There's more than one, pal. Look, I left New York too,
And you were in, where'd you go? Virginia. And you ended up back in the same boat.
Well, they started to invade, okay? They're invading again. I have no control over that. If I was allowed to have more guns, maybe a cannon or two, I could keep them a fair distance, arm's length away from me. I don't have this mindset of what are we going to do today, brain? I don't know. We're going to go out and conquer the world like we do every night, The hell, that's what the liberals are doing. They leave New York. Why? Because they raise the taxes so damn much up there. They don't like to pay high taxes. And what do they come down here to do in Virginia? They raise the taxes. The taxes are too low. We don't have everything we want here, blah, blah, blah. And then they raise the taxes. And then they're complaining about the taxes being so high that they themselves decided that they wanted to raise.
Well, it's just, that's the whole point of federalism, and that was the point that they wanted with Confederation. When we had the Articles of Confederation, we actually had a federal government. The states did everything. The federal government was only there to do very, very little. And you know what? We can argue the Constitution all day long, but again, we'll go back to our old standby. It was a Trojan horse. Hamilton and Madison got exactly what they wanted. They got it by stealth. They passed this Constitution that ended up in the exact place they wanted, with a strong national government that vetoes everything the state does.
Can I ask you a question there, Mr. Jeff, real quick?
Yes.
Can we talk about infectious diseases now?
Oh, let me find that.
Please.
Let me find that article here.
I'm sitting here waiting with bated breath for that.
I'm ready to go and so excited. So I can't. I'm just excited. So anybody who doesn't know, welcome to the world of Greg's public health mind and epidemiology. I study infectious diseases and things like that in my day job. In my afternoon job, I am a hacker, and my night job is always with the family. So infectious diseases, in case anybody really doesn't understand, they're caused by these, they're like pathogenic microorganisms is the overall group name you'd call them, like bacteria, viruses, parasites, fungus, things like that. But they can be spread directly and or indirectly from one person to another. A subcategory in there is zoonotic diseases. Did you know that, Jeff? Zoonotic diseases? They're infectious diseases
at the zoo.
They're the ones that animals have that can cause disease when transmitted to humans, like bird flu, avian flu, swine flu, things like that. That go from they fester in animals, and then they could be transferred to humans and have epidemic or pandemic types of responses to them. Okay, how'd I do?
Well, I'm trying to find that article. I can't.
Oh, I thought I put up enough time. Okay, so I'll go back and continue to talk about infectious diseases. Oh my God.
Did I put that in one of our emails? I don't know why. Go ahead, Junk Bond. I'm going to keep looking.
Okay, so let's talk about epidemics and pandemics of infectious diseases first. And just so you know, in case you're curious, a good example of infectious diseases could be something like Lyme disease, malaria, measles, meningitis, herpes, hepatitis A through E or whatever. Okay. Could be enterovirus, right? Everybody knows that one. Diphtheria. My favorite is dengue hemorrhagic fever. I did some studying of that one. And of course, there's, lots and lots more. There could be something as simple as botulism that can be passed from person to person, or something as deadly as anthrax. So there are many, many different types. And of course, the flu. The flu is definitely a infectious disease, and even things like lead poisoning and things like that. So there's lots and lots of different ones. Now, some spread differently than. Go ahead.
Oh, no, what I wanted to refer you to was the article on off-grid survival. I did find it. And the point of this is that infectious diseases are now making a comeback, not only we have people coming from across the border. We're seeing a resurgence in treatment-resistant tuberculosis, but we're also seeing, as a result of all the homelessness in these communities, especially in these liberal utopian societies, these diseases are making a comeback. Eradicated, this is the name of the article, Off-Grid Survival. I love this website. But eradicated diseases reemerge with a vengeance in liberal utopias throughout the U.S. And why is this happening? Well, think about the sanitation conditions or the lack of sanitary conditions that we had earlier. And we're seeing a resurgence of that with all these homeless towns. When I left California, it was bad enough, but now Los Angeles, they have entire tent cities. Even in the community where I grew up on El Camino Real by Stanford by Stanford University, I thought they were building, and I thought this is just where workers were staying while they were doing construction on the campus. All these recreational vehicles, old beaten up ones, parked along the main thoroughfare in the heart of Silicon Valley. And you know who these people are? They're homeless people. They have RVs, but not only that, you have all these homeless encampments in the tents and these communities where now these diseases are raging through. And this article here says that infectious diseases, some that have not been seen since medieval times, are popping up among homeless and drug populations in California and throughout the U.S. Now, remember,
which ones from medieval times that haven't been seen? I'm curious.
I haven't gotten that far.
Oh, okay. Don't tell me the bubonic plague, because bubonic plague is a current disease that is.
We have that in prairie dogs.
That's exactly right. It's all throughout the southwest of the U.S. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I've been vaccinated against is bubonic plague and pneumonic plague, which is a variant of it. Okay, so there's not just one type of bubonic plague that'll kill you and make you bleed from all different orifice. You can get it from lots of places too. So if they're going to bring up the bubonic plague, I discredit that article like yesterday.
They are also talking about typhus as an issue now that they're affecting city workers who have to forced to work in these conditions.
Yep.
Typhus used to be very uncommon. It was actually delisted, it says here, by the CDC in 1994. Now it's starting to show up again throughout these southern border states. And it shows the pictures of these homeless communities and encampments, outbreak of infectious diseases in Seattle, Washington. I'm starting to see a pattern here. Health officials are warning that a variety of outbreaks of infectious diseases are running through homeless populations in the city. And they have it's a public health issue. Alert that the health advisory in 2018 admitting they were investigating outbreaks of group A, strep, shingilla, and a rare group of infections transmitted by body lice. Measles is making a comeback. Now they're going to blame the anti-vaxxers for that. We know that. Viral outbreaks of hepatitis A throughout the United States.
So let's slow that down for a minute there for a second. Then you said they're going to blame the anti-vaxxers for which one? The measles?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty much everything. Whooping cough, whatever. If anything's going to come, make a comeback, it's because of people that are legitimately questioning vaccinations, particularly if they're mandated.
Right. So you're going to see these increases that will be roughly so far from the they call it epidemiological surveillance systems, where you actually are able to go out and collect data based on the number of these different types of infectious diseases that pop up in different locations. And you can say, okay, it's more prevalent here now, it's more prevalent here now, and actually name names, locations, what age groups that they're popping up in. So it's helpful in a big way. Things like typhus that are spread by they're the parasites that are in little freaking bugs of some, I forget what bugs carry it, right? But things like this are definitely becoming more prevalent. We will blame any infectious disease increase on the anti-vaxxers, regardless, in my opinion, regardless of whether or not you're vaccinated against it or not. And let me give you an example. Is the same thing with the bubonic plague or the flu, right? The flu is the thing that, have you had your flu shot? Have you had your flu shot? Did you get, no. Oh, last year it was only 30% effective, and somebody got thrown in jail for saying that from the CDC before it was publicly released that it was only 30% effective. And oh, by the way, that guy committed suicide when he was in jail by himself. Really? Oh yeah, oh yeah. You don't want to touch the vaccination story of the government. Don't go near it.
Well, I
That
think
will cause you problems.
the biggest one was, I think the biggest lie, and you've done shows on this, is the polio vaccine and how they lied about FDR's malady to promote this vaccine.
Sure, and it wasn't even Salk's vaccine. Salk's vaccine was actually, giving people more cases of polio. They were inducing polio in people. Yeah, because FDR had Guillain-Barré disease, which affected neurologically both sides of his body. Both of his legs were in braces, and he had to go in a wheelchair. Polio, by definition, can only attack one side of the body or the other. It's like shingles. It can only affect neurologically can only affect one side of the body or the other. That's how the disease works. Boom, bottom line. But not enough people knew about Guillain-Barré disease back in the day, so they just went and they called it, boom, polio. And of course, then the money families got involved with the development, and the March of Dimes and all that other stuff was all developed and put together by big money families. We'll just leave it at that because we could get into how all that was done, but that would take us off on a completely different tangent. And of course, the polio vaccine for Salk and who's the other guy who did the other vaccine? I can't think of it, but eventually they stopped giving Salk's vaccine, and they gave the other one right around the time that the number of cases of polio started to go down again. And that's the oral vaccine, the one you used to drink. That was the one that was given all around the world. It's still given in 90% of the world right now. The only place that's gone back to an injectable type of a vaccine is here in the States.
That's a live vaccine, right? The last
one. Yeah, it
one.
sure is. Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So I'm just curious. I know we're kind of going off on a tangent here, but
sorry about that. Yeah.
Did his medical advisors and the people treating him know the true nature of his disease? Were they in on it too? Did you do a Liberty Minutes on this topic, by the way, so we can have our listeners to it?
I think I did. I'm not sure. I have to go back and look again, but not really sure, because Guillain-Barré was an emerging disease of understanding at that time, meaning that it had been around, but it had been confused with polio for many years. Then it was just around the late 20s or so, early 30s, that the first scholarly papers started to come out about Guillain-Barré. I think it was actually 1928 when the first case was cited, that it was different in how it expressed itself than polio. It ended up with the same tragic results as polio, but eventually you would have complete suppression of the functionality of all of your vital organs, and of course respiratory too, and it would shut everything down and kill you. But there's no evidence to show that his doctors actually knew that it was not polio. Now, other people eventually probably knew that by the 40s, the early 40s or so, late 30s, early 40s. Guillain-Barré was pretty well known, and people understood that it was different than polio, but a lot of kids were still misdiagnosed. So at the research areas, they knew what was going on, but like your little town doctor, your out in the farm and stuff, they didn't really know the difference at that point, because the information had not been pushed to them. So they were still treating it like polio.
One of the reasons I brought this up is, if politics cannot get us out of this mess we are in, this is why I like to combine preparedness and politics. How will you personally, in the event of a collapse, be able to prevent, avoid, treat, possibly cure, or survive these diseases that are going to be coming our way? We've got these diseases that are based on, failure of hygiene and acceptable living conditions like we discussed in these particularly liberal utopian societies where you really don't have a middle class in these areas. It's either the poverty stricken or the very elite. So what are you going to do if politics can't fix this? That's why I like to describe this. I've done shows with a guy named Joe Alton, MD, also known as Dr. Bones. He's got a great medical survival website called Doom and Bloom. I encourage you to check that out. And if you get his book, you can probably, he says, treat over 90% of the maladies on your own that you're going to encounter in the event that medical treatment is not available. So these are the diseases that we can look forward to if we can't fix this situation. Healthcare is also going to be more and more difficult to get as the government takes over more of that. It is incumbent upon you to learn how to treat these things on your own. But here's a really good article. It's from of2minds.com. A guy named Charles Hugh Smith is asking, what if politics can't fix what's broken? And he says here there's an unspoken assumption of the modern era is that politics can fix whatever is broken. Whatever's broken in society or the economy can be fixed by some political policy or political process, becoming more inclusionary, seeking nonpartisan middle ground, etc. But what if, they ask, this assumption is flat out wrong? I submit to you he is. Are you guys seeing politics fixing anything? I will say this one thing. You know, I don't cheer on one elected king over another, and I can argue the good and the bad that has benefited us since President Trump was elected. And again, yes, I voted for him because I detest Hillary Clinton. I'm tired of voting defensively, but we're at the point where we need more time. One of the reasons I will support him in the next election, constitutional, originalist or not, he is absolutely not. We know he's a progressive. He's a speed bump. Watch out for what's going to happen when these people win. This is why they want to get rid of the Electoral College. There's talk. I'm going to be talking.
We had someone in our chat mentioned the Electoral College, and I didn't bring it up because it was off topic at the time. Because we discussed. I told him we discussed it on last Friday's show.
We talked about it last week, but this week I'm also going to get into the court pack.
Address him a little bit though for a second on that, because what I told him in the chat is that the states can change their electors in the fact that how they appropriate them to the election. So if they want to go by popular vote, they can do that. That's within their power, and that's not unconstitutional. They're not getting rid of the Electoral College. They're just changing how they apportion them. The problem is what we're going to end up having is the small states are going to take themselves out of relevance in the presidential elections. So the small states will mean nothing. So once they get this into a popular vote, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Idaho, all these small states in the middle with small populations, guess how many times a candidate's going to go there and campaign? Zero. Never. They will never go.
There's no point.
Because they'll go to Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York City. They get those, they win the election. So, okay, I'm sorry about that. But I wanted to address that since we brought it up. I wanted to bring that up so that our listener in the chat room knows that we do see these things.
Well, they're in it to win it. And we are always reactionary. They're planning ahead. How can we ultimately achieve a complete and total takeover and have domination and perpetuity for our big government politics? So again, we have this assumption that politics can fix things. We've got to get the right person in the White House so he or she can put in the proper Supreme Court justice that is going to be a constitutional conservative. That's how we're going to defeat Roe versus Wade. We're completely ignoring the concept of federalism, that the states have the power and the obligation to settle this. But again, because of the indoctrination, because of the complete brainwashing, thanks to the government education system, they don't understand this. And like we said with the Electoral College, these states are slitting their own throats. Politics, especially from a national, pardon my French, level, will fix nothing. We are going to see more oppression, more taxes, more tyranny, more punishment, worse health care. It's not going to get better. So this article says that saying that politics will fix this, they refer to it as heresy of the highest order. For there is a belief in the supremacy of politics. It's the secular religion of our era. I refer you to my article, The Church of the National Government. These people are, it's a fervorish reliance on a Washington, D.C. non-representative form of government to solve all our problems. I was involved in a Twitter debate with a very hardcore progressive who blames the evil corporations putting profit over people, and we need government to check them. And by the way, the Constitution only exists to protect some fundamental rights. Other than that, it's a free game. They can do whatever the people want. This is the mindset that we're up against. But these people who want to grant so much power to Washington, D.C., we saw went into a complete and total meltdown when they all of a sudden didn't have their guy at the helm. So now they're going to cheat. They're going to change everything. Again, pack the courts. They say it'll be better for our democracy. It's going to be the death knell of our republic. Yes, it will give us a democracy. And that's exactly what the founders put in place to avoid, or did they? Jeff, we just came across another argument that showed that the Constitution was flawed. We were talking about it last night, but I don't remember what it was. I'll have to find it. But again, this is the heresy of the highest order, that we cannot find a solution outside of Washington, D.C. Another question for you to think about is, what if the status quo is failing for reasons that are beyond the reach of politics? Again, when I was talking to this individual on Twitter that says the government needs to keep these big corporations in check, who do you think? They mentioned Monsanto. Clarence Thomas was on the board of Monsanto. How many of these bigwigs in the government have been on the board of Monsanto, go back and forth from government positions to board members on these corporations that they say are the blame for our ills? Junk Bond, go ahead.
That's stuff, boy. That's just good, clean fun right there. That just cracks me up. I tell you, to be so ignorant, and then it's the same individual who's arguing with me, as a matter of fact.
Yes.
And I'm just sitting, tell us that we're in some fantasy land. And I was thinking to myself, my God, you're denying reality and you say we're living in fantasy. That's tremendously ironic, but entertaining at the same time.
Entertaining,
it was the science portion of the Constitution. And we'll talk about that in another show.
Okay.
We just really don't have time to get on that, but that's the section. And we talked about that. We'll talk about it another day.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
They also say here that centralization is obviously a bad idea, as we say here. Centralization works until it becomes the problem, at which point further centralization of power and capital only speeds system-wide failure. Isn't this the case all along? Name a problem that we have today at a national, pardon my French, national level, that is not the cause of a large central government that is thrown off its constitutional restraints. Name one. I'll wait. Dead air. Okay. I don't think we can find one.
It's going to be a lot of dead air for the rest of this show.
Right. Well, I can get another cup of coffee. So government, they also continue here, can force certain things, but it can't force everything. We'll tell them that, because I really don't think there's anything they can off limit. Government can encourage borrowing, but it can't force its citizens to borrow. I disagree here, because we have to borrow. They also look at if you want to put your kid in college, you have to, because of, go ahead.
Did I have a choice in 22 trillion? Or did they just borrow that money, and I'm now on the hook for it. So they
sound upset.
That's actually I don't agree with that sentence either.
Yeah, and look at healthcare. Everybody's forced to have health insurance. I lost my health insurance several times. Now I'm finally stuck. I've been put on these exchanges. I can't get private insurance. It's ridiculous. And then the thing is, my insurance is supposed to be $1,500 a month. I used to pay for my insurance for my boys and myself. It was like $300, and I was happy to pay that. What's going to happen now? Is there going to be some clause that when I'm gone, they're going to attach these insurance benefits that I never wanted and never used to my estate and collect it? We have to remember the end game here is the redistribution of wealth.
So here's an interesting point about that is, folks, if anybody out there thinks that the cost for medical care, not health care, stop saying health care, because health care implies a public population. Medical care is the individual care that you get for treatment for your personage, or your children's personage. You get medical care. It is a semantics game where they're actually changing the name of what it is. So you think in the collective of population health and not in individual medical care, number one. Number two, the cost for medical care is completely and totally elevated by the federal government.
Same with student loans.
And I will give the perfect example here. You can debate all day if you'd like. I'm just going to give you one real quick, perfect example. And I'm not going to go to the pharmaceutical companies. I'm not going to go to medical equipment. I'm not going to go to hospitals and the healthcare management system run by HHS and CMS and all the other rules and regulations and stuff like that. I'm going to go to my trip over to Malaysia. And in leaving Malaysia, there was a group of us there. We were out training. We were conducting training on behalf of the UN for policemen and investigators. And we broke the first week, at the end of the first week, and everybody went to Thailand for a couple of days over to our friend's house there. He lived there. And we stayed there. Well, one of the guys who was going over there, his wife, he brought his wife with him. It was very nice. She happens to be an emergency room physician, and she got food poisoning, one of those infectious diseases we were just talking about. And she got botulism. So what's the first thing you do with botulism? Number one is you hydrate. Well, you can't really drink the water from too many other places out there. So we had to go to plan B, and that was to get the Ringer's lactate solution and give her an IV, which was no problem. We just had to get the stuff. Well, it was easy enough. We walked down to the local pharmaceutical store, picked up a bag of Ringer's lactate. I got a couple of needles. We got some, and we wired her up for sound.
Trying to do that here in the United States.
And any idea of the total cost of all of the medical equipment?
It's probably very cheap. But try to go down to your pharmacy and pick up lactated Ringers, tubing, IV, or needle. Try to pick that up. See how that works out for you here in the United States.
It cost me less than a Hamilton in US dollars to pick that stuff up. And I didn't have the overregulation of being forced to take her to an emergency room to treat her. I knew what was wrong with her. She knew what was wrong with her. Bam! We were able to take care of it and not have to charge into the system, not have to pay overly insane prices for a bag of Ringers. Oh my God, the prices, and the tubing and the needles. $9, folks. It cost $9. That was it, and we did it right in the house. It was great. I had a little bit of alcohol there. We drank a little bit because it was scotch. We didn't have anything else, but we used alcohol to clean it up there and make sure everything was good. And that's the important part. Don't forget that. But she was fine within an hour and a half, 2 hours. She was fine.
Yeah, if she did that here, she would have to go to the emergency room. She would have to be there for a few hours, and they would probably charge the insurance company $2,000 or $3,000.
Oh, easy. And I would be under investigation, right, for giving her an IV because, well, you know what? Somebody in my status, I shouldn't be allowed to know how to do that. And I shouldn't be allowed to attack someone like that. Right. I would have had charges filed against me by the hospital staff.
Yeah.
This is how insane stupid crap is.
My medic license has lapsed because I don't practice anymore. Does that mean the knowledge is gone? No. But I would be under arrest for practicing without a license if I started an IV on somebody and gave them the because I know exactly what I would needed to do too. If I was there, just a paramedic, I would have known to give her an IV, whether it been normal saline or lactated bringers. It would only have made any difference.
Doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Thing in the end, but I would get arrested for practicing without a license if I did that.
And I would make sure that I called the police officers and arrested you.
Good thing you guys know a lawyer.
Who's that? Who's that?
Don't push your luck, pal.
So wrapping up this article, what they talk about is, again, we have this rapid centralization due to government creating a problem. How do they solve the problem? I don't care if it's education. I don't care if it's
create more problems. That's how they solve it.
We're going to create more problems. Government can force certain things, but they can't force everything. Well, good luck finding that. Here's the other thing. You know, how many people have to get medical checkups annually because their jobs require it? At what point will the government require flu shots or other vaccinations? We're seeing in California, for instance, they've lost their philosophical waiver. They're talking about a national, pardon my French, vaccine mandate where, you know, isn't it going to be a time, especially if the progressives completely take over, where part of our very survival, oh, well, we have a national ID now. We're seeing passports taken away if you're behind on taxes. What about if you can't get your driver's license or your privileges are revoked if you haven't kept up with your flu shots or you haven't, we see you haven't gotten your annual medical check where they poke and prod you in places you might not want to be poked and prodded, but you have to put up with it. So what? Maybe you can go to work?
Look at, you got the truck drivers. They have to get their OSHA physical I believe it's 3 years. Me, because of my age, to be a firefighter, I am on the fire brigade at work. Every year, I have to go to a doctor and get an OSHA physical because the government has required it. Government has required it for truck drivers. Nurses, you talk about this mandatory vaccination. A lot of nurses, for their job, they're required to have the vaccination. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, and I just want to add one thing here. Sorry about that. I had my phone out to say this. I want to read this a quote to kind of summarize that article. And now that I turn my phone, and I know, I bet you most of you will figure out who this was. In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. So, and you know what? Yeah, yes, exactly. It was correct back when Reagan said it. It's correct today. It would have been correct when if Jefferson had said that. Doesn't matter. Government is our problem. We need to get less government. Get far less government is what we need to get.
Did you say we need far left government?
We got that.
Oh, well, my bad. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And one thing they point out here is government cannot force a negative return on investment to magically become positive. It can prohibit and tax and force outward compliance, but it can't force people to agree with policies that run counter to their beliefs. They can't rescue a status quo, which is falling due to negative return on investment, gross inefficiencies, loss of trust in corrupt institutions. Hello, go back to what we started on this show earlier with the corruption of the DOJ and the CIA, etc. all the other ills that are intrinsic to centralization and power and capital. None of this is going to be overcome politically. What they say here as a result, the greater, and this, I say this all the time. I like to find these articles because I don't feel like I'm such a lone nutcase saying this stuff here. Other people are thinking it too. The greater the government's power, the greater the polarization. As the self-serving elites seek to protect their share of the pie, I call it the pig trough, the pie shrinks. Each camp becomes increasingly extreme, and compromise is recognized as a process that erodes every camp's power and income. The political solution is take no prisoners domination and the eradication of the rival's power to veto or contest the domination of the winner. Folks, this is exactly the end game that we are facing right now with the Electoral College, with the voter ID laws being overturned, with the massive immigration change we've seen since the 1965 Immigration Act. The packing of the Supreme Court, which FDR tried to do, and that failed. They're going to double down and do this again. This is why I tell people, stop looking to the federal judiciary or wait for the Supreme Court to rule on something that's important to you that was never intended to be a matter for the general government to decide. Ultimately, they will win, they will get their way, and lost in the arguments are going to be the real solutions. Decentralization, nullification, secession, peaceful political divorce. I think I hear some music. Are we out of time, Jeff, Mr. Producer?
No.
Oh,
We got 4 minutes.
You just hear the noise in my head.
Again.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's noisy in there. So again, what this article is saying, we are not going to solve this politically, not as one United States of America. Every issue is a hot button of political contention. You cannot safely walk down the street with a MAGA hat. You cannot express your political views or be a member of, say, the presidential administration or staff without being accosted or confronted in restaurants. Gone are the days of civility. I don't like to just point the finger at the Democrats, but remember, when Obama was elected and reelected, we won. Get used to it. He's everybody's president. Give him a chance. What do we hear now? Resist. We have this ridiculous, asinine 2-year investigation. Nobody that got dragged into any kind of indictment had anything to do with Russian collusion, which in the first place was not a crime. I have to say, I think this was blatant incompetence on the part of President Trump, first of all, to, again, select Jeff Sessions. I think this discussion should have been had before he was hired. Maybe it was. Maybe Sessions betrayed him by recusing himself, because that recusal is why we got Mueller and Rosenstein running this dog and pony show for 2 years. 2 years. Trump should have fired Sessions immediately. He was too afraid of the recoil from the Democrat Party. Maybe it's 5,000-degree chess, and I'm not savvy enough to keep up with what he's doing. If it was, I think 2 years of wasted time was a game that we never should have entered into. He should have said, you know what? If Obama can have a DOJ and an attorney general who's going to have his back, then so too can I. Am I off base on that one, you guys?
Jeff, I'll let you hit it.
No, I mean, all I can say is no. You're not off base on that. It's just, again, unfortunately, 99% of stuff they do down there is political theater. Again, to red meat to the masses. So no, you're not wrong.
When we come back on the air next time, there's a companion article to this one I was reading about what if politics can't fix the solution. It's a really interesting article, and it says which nations will crumble and which few will prosper in the next 25 years. Something to think about. Do you think the United States is going to make it in its present form in the next 25 years? Do you think we're going to have any states secede? I don't know where we're going to be in the next 25 years. Do you think that maybe we'll have some secession, or do you think it's going to go hardcore left and even more draconian?
You know what's, I'm going to go with, there was a Chinese assessment done about 20 years ago that is available through the National Defense University Press. And it was called China Debates Future Security Environment. You can Google it. You can get it free from the Gutenberg Press and a couple other places. And in there, they state that by the year 2032, the United States will be no longer will be the sole world superpower, that they will be in a state of decline at such a rate that they will no longer be considered the world power. They'll only be a regional power in the world if they're still together.
I'm okay with that. I mean, do we really have to have what the Navy says is a global force for good? I just saw an ad for the Army on TV last night, again, showing that we are the police of the world. We are the bank for the rest of the world. There was another Army ad that showed a gentleman of Mideastern persuasion in what appeared to be the scope of a rifle. But when you looked out, it was a United States soldier doing surveying to rebuild their country, nation building. This is.
You see the photo of the air lady in her hijab or whatever those things are called? We don't have time. We're down to a minute, but I just was bringing that up.
I'll just throw in one other thing along the line of the military real quick before we end this up here. According to the World Freedom Index, we are number 71 in the world of military interference in rule of law and politics. Only number 71. Yay, America.
Yay. So, folks, when I mention governments like Switzerland, we talk about that all the time. I've said Switzerland has a decentralized government. You never see them involved in any wars. Somebody said nobody cares about Switzerland. I said, that's my point. That is exactly my point. I think we are this, I think what Reagan said was the last frontier of freedom. If this is gone, what's left? This is why we're such a prize ticket for the Marxists. This is why we have this influence. Folks, I suggest to you, come back. We'll figure out when we're going to be on again this week. Junk Bond, you have a great week. We will miss you. I hope people continue to tune in when you're gone. Jeff, thank you very much. I'm Suzanne Sherman on behalf of the rest of us here at Cerberus Radio Network. Thank you for listening.